Hey there, it's your co-host Sid.
And this is your co-host, Sharfuz. We know that job search is a difficult process. It can be frustrating, it's hard to network, find the right fit for yourself, and it can be a very lonely journey.
Here at Careers Uncorked, we're trying to bridge that journey and have amazing conversations with people.
And we want to welcome you to our episode today.
Sharfuz, how's it going? Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday, dude. I don't know, another day in Boston. It's a nice weather, and it's been raining the whole week, but it's nice to have like a sunny Saturday. But how are things on your end, dude? How's Austin?
It's kind of the same. It was actually raining this morning, so it's been a little dull. But yeah, still can't get over like the intro part where you're like, such a lonely journey.
I think our energy did not match up there. I emphasized too much. Hey, you told me to be over dramatic or something like that.
I say that sometimes.
Yeah, just making up some of the failed acting career that I never had or maybe I could have had. But yeah, dude, I think our session today is going to be really interesting, especially because I think Michelle really pushed us for this session because she got tired of all the tech people we were covering, and she was like, no, we need people in the law industry and people who are in making their career as a lawyer, and we need them on the show. So I'm super glad we're like going beyond that tech stuff we keep used to.
For sure. Another fun fact is I just found out that Sharfuz and our guest are like next door neighbors.
Yeah, so let's get Annie to the stage. I'm excited to connect with her and and hear her story and how she made it so far.
For sure. Hey Annie, how's it going?
Hi everyone.
Hey Annie, happy Saturday in Boston.
Yeah.
How's your weekend so far?
It's good. It's really nice out, which you guys were just talking about, and apparently Sharfuz and I share weather. So.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, everyone is here. Everyone's in Boston. Except Sid. Sid. It's the other one.
Odd one out. Went as far from Rochester as I could. Ended up in Austin. That's crazy. All right, well, anyways, let's get us started. So Annie, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
So hi everyone, my name is Annamarie Forestiere. I'm here because I'm going to be your law connection for the day. So and I'm really excited to be here and talk to everyone.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, we're super excited. Like Sharfuz said, one of our people on the team was really, really excited to have you on the show, and she was like, "You have to get someone from law. There's too much tech people going around here."
Yeah, yeah. So. Annie, yeah, let's jump into it, Annie. I think one of the first things I really like to hear about people is that when you look back at undergrad at UFR, spoiler alert, we're all UFR people, guys. But what do you think were some of your significant experiences that sort of had a big impact in your life so far?
Well, there's actually a bunch of them. So I was pretty involved on campus, and I think that we could condense everything into what experiences stood out as being so involved in a small campus. So I was RA for a few years. I worked in the Transition Opportunities at University of Rochester program, which helped students with intellectual and developmental disabilities get acclimated to U of R. I was a speaking fellow. I was in the business fraternity. There wasn't really any one experience. It was the fact that I had a hand in so many different parts of campus and got to feel really connected to different groups of people that was most memorable.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I feel like we've been hearing a lot that people's experiences were like the ones they remember are the ones outside classes mostly. So definitely a heads up to our audience that do as much as you can outside classes and just get involved. That teaches you so much. That's great. I think. So I'm curious, what influenced you to pursue law school? Like, when did you know you wanted to do it, and what got you towards that?
Well, everyone in my family always joked that I should be a lawyer because I talk too much. So that was fun. I had no interest in going to law school or being a lawyer. I was actually pretty dead set on going into arts administration. That was what I went to undergrad for, was business and music. And then I did an internship at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. with the Washington National Opera, which was really cool. and I got to shadow their general counsel, which is like the lawyer who's in charge of the entire company. And I was immediately right face. I was like, all right, this is it. This is what we're doing. We're going to be a lawyer.
That is so awesome. I think two of the things you just mentioned really stood out to me, especially being at the UFR. I think there's so much opportunity to get involved. I actually went to State University before I transferred over to University of Rochester, and it was definitely nowhere close because there were so many people. It was really hard to sort of join a student organization or be able to contribute or learn things. So I think that really sort of stood out to me. Along with that, I think being able to try out a career before you actually jump into it, sort of through that vision that you've had, I think that really speaks volumes, because a lot of people don't really get the chance until their junior year or senior year, where they're sort of like in that position where they have to make a decision. They don't really have too many options to explore at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, do you want to kick us off? Because we want to learn a little more about your law school application process.
Yep, for sure. So one of my first questions, and this is really funny because I messaged Shafuz before this, and I was like, "What is the LSAT?" So the first question is, what is the LSAT, and how do you prepare for it?
The LSAT is the bane of my existence. The LSAT is basically an exam that functions like the SAT does for general college, or like the MCAT does for med school, but it's supposed to be focused on just law stuff. The problem is that unlike the MCAT and the SAT, most people haven't taken law-specific classes at the point in their life when they will be applying to law school. So it doesn't really test you on specific legal concepts like the MCAT does with biology. It tests you on your reading skills, your writing skills, and these things called logic games, which are supposed to tell how logical you are. But it's basically like if Amy, Ben, and George go to the movies, and Amy's wearing George's shirt, and George is eating popcorn, like what movie is playing? It's just, it's completely pointless, but it's supposed to tell how logical you are.
Wow. That is absolutely insane. I've taken a couple of those. It's usually the ones with the shapes that they have in a couple of interviews that we have for tech firms. Those are just like, it's like, how is this relevant? Like, what are you gonna take out of this? Like, that's absolutely crazy. So, what was the sort of process like for you to prepare for this? Because I've heard, like, especially SAT was really challenging for me. So, assuming these sort of tests that you have to take, like LSAT, are even more challenging because it's after you sort of graduate college.
So you prepare for it pretty similarly to the way that you would prepare for the SAT, in terms of you have like books and modules that can guide you through things. I think the difference is you need significantly more time to prepare for it, because a lot of the things that they're asking you aren't necessarily things that are intuitive in your brain. Like the Amy, George, and Ben at the movie thing isn't something that I think about on a given day, right? That's just not how people's brains work. So I think the one thing that really helped me was knowing that there are free resources out there for people interested in going to law school. There are really expensive prep classes that you can take, but you don't have to do that. If you want to, it will help. If you don't want to, it's still possible to study. And the second most important thing is just to give yourself a lot of time to prep. I think I started prepping like 4 or 5 months in advance, something like that.
Wow. And this is while you were still in college, right? So you were pursuing your undergraduate degree and preparing for the LSAT.
Yeah. So I took the LSAT this like late summer, early fall of senior year. So I spent all summer after junior year and the first like month or two of senior year studying.
Wow. That must have been fun.
Oh, it was great. It was so great to start my senior year saying no to all the social events. It was fun.
That's so funny. So in your vision, what was sort of the hardest part about the application to law school?
Definitely the personal statement, because it's the one that's the least formulaic, right? Like, obviously you have to have good grades, you have to get a good LSAT score, you have to get recommendations from professors, but the personal statement is, you feel like you're trying to guess what the law schools want you to say. You're trying to portray yourself in a way that will make them pick you out of the hundreds of applicants. And at some point you just have to stop doing that and just write what is an accurate representation of yourself and your journey. but getting to the point where you recognize that, going through like dozens and dozens of iterations of the statement is draining.
That's definitely.
That's-
I can relate to that in some sort of way. I hate writing personal statements whenever it comes to any sort of application. So I bet it's a lot harder when you're doing this for a lot of college applications.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna quickly ask you, Annie, that when you were looking for law schools, right? Did you do a lot of research as well, or like where to apply, or like how did you approach that part of it? Like where to go, what's available, and all that stuff.
So I had no idea about any of this. Nobody in my family is a lawyer. I'm the second gen to go to college at all. So it was really helpful for me to sit down with U of R's career services, and most colleges have some sort of law specialized person in their career center who can sit down and help with you. It's important to have, like when you're applying to regular college, a range of schools. So you need to have like your reach schools, your good fit schools, and then your safety schools, right? It's also important to think about, if you know what kind of area of law you want to practice, look at the rankings of that area and the programs that they have. If you don't know what kind of area of law you want to practice, that's okay. You should also really consider geography. This was something that I didn't know at all. So law school is you kind of get pigeonholed into the geography of where you're going to be located. So I did my first year of law school at Indiana, and Indiana tends to send most of its students to big cities in Indiana, like Indianapolis, or they send people to Chicago, or they send people to Nashville. It tends to be more Midwest oriented. So if you know that you don't want to live on the West Coast, going to a top 14 law school, which is another big thing, you should go in the geographic region where you want to practice.
Got that. That makes sense. So geography and the areas you want to practice, that becomes a really big factor there, I guess, when that's pretty cool. I think I don't know if I asked you this before, but what's your focus? Like, what are you trying to focus on with your law practice?
So when I first went to law school, I wanted to do music law. So like arts admin, except on the legal end of things. So I went to Indiana because they have a really good intellectual property law program, which is where you would get that arts law underneath the IP label.
Yeah.
And then I went to law school and realized that that's not what I want to do at all. So that's completely normal, and it happens to most people. Now at this point, I think I want to get into public policy or government work or legal academia, something big picture that will help me make social change on like a national level, but more behind the scenes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty cool.
So Annie, my next question to you is, what is something you wish that you knew before sort of getting into this whole application process of law school?
It's going to take a lot longer than you think it's going to. And the LSAT is by far the most important part. Different people will give you different opinions on this and will probably disagree with me. But in my experience, they try to downplay how important the LSAT is. No, it's incredibly important, at least for the first time you're applying. If you're transferring, the LSAT doesn't really matter at all. What matters are your first year grades. But initially, give yourself time to retake the LSAT if you don't get a score that you like. But don't retake it more than like 3 times. After that, they start to get a little creeped out.
that's like a red flag.
Right.
Wow, gotcha. All right, and my last question for this segment is, how did you sort of portray your story in these applications? You mentioned the personal statement is one of the biggest parts. So how did you sort of frame that whole journey that you've been through, and what you're looking to, why you're looking to sort of pursue law school?
So it's really important to be truthful and genuine in your personal statement, because the law is very based on ethics, and it would be very unethical if you lied. So I did 2 different personal statements because I transferred. So my first personal statement right out of college, going into my first year of law school, talked about how I decided I wanted to become a lawyer, and how nobody in my family knows anything about being a lawyer, and how I'm from a tiny town. And I talked a lot about my passion for the specific area of law that I was going into. I sort of tied together the business and music undergrad degrees into intellectual property law, because that's what was relevant at that time. In my second personal statement, I talked a lot about concepts of adversity and not getting where you want to go the first time around, because I was applying to transfer to a different school.
Right. That makes sense. And so I guess it evolved for you. Like it's also like depending on. Do you think your interest changed there a little bit, or like was okay? Because after
Yeah.
first, you knew more about like how to approach this.
Yeah, very much so. Also, pro tip, if they give you optional supplemental essays for schools that apply to you, do them.
Okay.
Diversity essays or a hardship that you faced, you should always do those essays.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a good pro tip there. I think you mentioned that the Career Center had some resources, but I think a lot something interesting I want to cover is that what other resources have you used, or like do you know of that you would recommend future applicants, like outside your school or even in your school? What should people look into?
So if you're the type of person who has connections in the legal industry, so if you have family members who are lawyers, if you have friends or distant acquaintances that you know that are in law school, that is going to be by far your most valuable resource. So if you can get connected to a current law student in some way or someone who is working in the legal industry, you should definitely talk to them and pick their brain. There's also just so many like blogs and forums and things like that online that you can like Google your stupid questions if you have no way of figuring them out and are too embarrassed to ask the Career Center.
Yeah.
And then I really can't emphasize enough the Career Center's importance with this. Find the person who specializes in getting people to law school and make them your best friend.
So I guess big connections, the right connections is also important here. Especially, okay, that makes sense. Because I think normally you would think like grads, because it's very in job focus, you're like, okay, it's all about the connections, but normally you wouldn't think so much about grad school, but I guess it does make sense.
Yeah. Law is all about connections and name, which is problematic, but we won't get into that.
That's very true. All right. Yeah. Well, I just want to acknowledge the Career Center. I actually worked for them while I was at Rochester, and we've had pretty much a few people from the Career Center. So that's really, really awesome to hear that you've had a positive experience with them. Shout out to Coach Snowden. He's also one of our advisors. But I'd also like to take a question from the audience. So Michelle, who is on the Careers and Uncorked team, who also personally reached out to you.
Hi, Michelle.
All right. So Michelle's asking, did you find that going right from undergraduate to law school impacted your application?
Absolutely. I think it can be limiting in certain situations and it can be empowering in other situations. So for schools that are harder to get into, like a top 14 school, I have noticed that a lot of the people at Harvard and at other schools didn't go straight through because having some sort of relevant career experience between undergrad and law school can be very helpful for your application. That being said, it's definitely not necessary. I'm what we call a KJD, right? So kindergarten through law degree. There are also so many KJDs at Harvard and at Indiana. So it's definitely something to consider if you have a really cool job opportunity lined up and you think it would enhance your application and you're not in any rush to get to law school. That could definitely help you be a more competitive candidate.
I think that's great advice. Thanks so much, Michelle, for that awesome question.
Yeah, our future Harvard law student in the making. Not to throw any pressure at you, Michelle. I know you're listening to this, but that's awesome. Annie, I think that sort of brings me to the next part I would love to cover is that I think you started at Indiana first for your law school, and then you moved to Harvard Law School. And I think at some point you were trying to go to Cornell, maybe.
Yes.
I remember following your story there. So I think first I'm curious, like what initially made you want to transfer? Like, was there a particular experience, or did you know, like, okay, you wanted more from life than being at Indiana? Like, what was it?
So first of all, I loved Indiana and I miss it all the time. So I definitely was not, there are some people who have bad experiences at their first year law schools and that's the reason they transfer. That was definitely not me. I'm really sad that I left a lot of the time. I went into law school knowing that I wanted to transfer. And a lot of that comes down to the name and the geography and the LSAT scores. So it all ties together. So I did not score nearly as highly on my LSAT the first time around. And I got waitlisted at, I think, 8 or 9 schools. And And the reason that I had chosen these schools that I wanted to go to was because they were on the East Coast. So geography is really important. And they were highly ranked in terms of academia. So if I do want to pursue a legal career in academia, it's shameful, but it's very important to go to a highly ranked school. It's the way that the industry works. It's very hard to break into legal academia if you don't go to a top 14 school. I went into Indiana thinking that I would make the most out of my year there and work really hard and hopefully be able to transfer to a school on the East Coast that would put me in a better position to be able to be a law professor someday if that's something that I want to do.
For sure, that makes sense. So you had like a game plan. Like you were like, I'm like,
I did.
it's like literally, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
That's and it definitely impacted the way that I got involved in my first year law school too. So that's something else to consider, is that it's very hard to uproot yourself after your first year, because your first year, they call it like, it's like going through the trenches with your people, right? Your first year of law school is very challenging because law school is just so different from anything you've ever done. And so it's hard to leave that support group of people and the professors that you know and the life that you've been building and start somewhere new. So if you have a good reason to transfer, you should transfer. If you don't have a good reason to transfer, it might not be worth it, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned that, because how challenging was that? Because you have your law classes and also another round of applications. Was that crazy at that time for you?
Yeah, spring of my first year of law school was a little crazy. So since I had known going into it that I wanted to transfer, I was able to prepare a little bit better. So my friends from 1L called me the grandma of the friend group because I didn't do as many social things as I probably should have, because I would get up early and go to the library instead of staying out. So I planned ahead so that I had good grades, but that meant that you have to spend so much time focusing on your studies that juggling another round of law school applications at the same time is kind of overwhelming. It was also really important, and it's important in general to befriend your faculty and learn from them and be able to get good recommendations, but it's especially important if you're planning on transferring, because you only have a year to make those connections. And if you don't get letters of recommendation from current faculty members, you're probably not going to get very far, because they want to see how you do in a law school setting, not just in like life in general. So it involves planning ahead and just being really diligent and working really hard to juggle your time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess definitely like the discipline there comes in. Like you have to like match and like you have to do so many things at the same time. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I think so. I guess like one of the more important questions would be like, how is life at Harvard Law? Because I think that's probably like a dream for so many people as a law school. Like I personally, I'm one of my dreams to go to Harvard Business School, so like a neighbor. But like, how has your experience been so far at Harvard Law?
It's been kind of surreal, actually. I'm not going to lie, and I know that a lot of people probably don't experience the surrealness the way that I do. But since I don't have 8 generations of people who have gone to Harvard Law, right? It's a little disorienting to be, in a good way. It's a little disorienting to be in class with your professor being general counsel for President Obama and President Clinton, or the woman who argued and won the Obergefell case before the Supreme Court, which gave the country gay marriage, right? Like it's so bizarre. I pet a golden retriever last fall, and then I walked away and my friend was like, that was Elizabeth Warren's dog, Bailey. And I was like, everywhere you go, you find like little snippets of famous people. And if you're not already in that world, it's very disorienting, but it's so cool. And it's so cool to be able to learn from these people and have so many opportunities that I wouldn't have gotten to have at other law schools. So being at Harvard helped me get an internship on a federal appellate court as a current law student, which is really cool. There's so many more classes because it's such a big school. So you can take like really niche classes that aren't offered at smaller schools. The one downside is that it's so big, so it is a little bit more difficult to connect with your professors. So like joining student organizations is really important. So you can be with your groups, and just befriending your professors is a little harder.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a big thing. And another question I have is like starting off this year, it's been absolutely crazy with 2020. People have been working remotely, and people have been really, college was taking a full 180. It's completely virtual. How's that treating you? And like, what has been your journey with classes and taking classes online?
So classes online in general are really not ideal. I think any student in any program would agree to that. It is cool to be able to like wear sweatpants all the time. I'm not, that is pretty great. So I think that Harvard did a decent job of figuring out a way to do online classes and prepping their professors for how to teach online and things like that. I think that there's no way that online learning is ever going to completely compare to in-person learning. There's just a sense of disconnect from your peers. There's a sense of like living in a bubble and just like doing nothing but like move from one room to the other, reading your law papers over and over again, you know, which I think everyone is experiencing in any career or school to an extent.
For sure. And what has been sort of your favorite class so far at Harvard Law School?
Oh God. There's so many. I took a class on LGBTQ plus litigation strategy with the woman who won gay marriage before the Supreme Court. And that was really cool. I took a class on presidential power during times of conflict, which was also really cool.
Yeah.
And right now I'm taking, my favorite class right now is probably election law, which is super relevant right now and kind of terrifying, but also it's really cool to be learning the field, the groundwork of what we're experiencing right now. Like that's a really cool experience.
That's for sure. Yeah, these are some really interesting classes that you mentioned, and it just fits right in. It's so relevant to today's day and age.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Quick question there. Do you get a lot of flexibility? Like, you know, at Rochester, we had an open curriculum. Like, we could pick our electives and literally we could take any classes to some extent. Do you have that flexibility in law school, or do you have to follow a particular program and you have to take that?
This is actually an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked because it's important to know, and I totally would have forgotten about it. So pretty much every law school across the country teaches the same 1L curriculum. So
Right.
1L is first year, 2L is second year, 3L is third year. In 1L, you're going to take a property class. You're going to take a contracts class. You're going to take a civil procedure class. You're probably going to take a criminal law class. Like your first year is just basically the same across the board, which is why you can only transfer after your first year because they're assuming that you have those. Yeah. After that, every law school has different requirements in terms of like, have you done enough pro bono hours, which is volunteering? Have you have to do a clinic, which is where you're like a baby lawyer working under the supervision of actual lawyers talking with clients? Have you done enough writing? Is there a written work requirement? But other than those like very general things, you can take whatever class you want. So as long as you're hitting the minimum number of credits, and as long as during the next 2 years, you are hitting whatever those general requirements are of like, you did one clinic, you wrote 2 15-page papers, and you volunteered for 25 or 50 hours, as long as you're hitting whatever the general things are, you can do whatever you want, which is really cool.
But I'm good. Oh, thanks for sharing that. I think that would be very valuable for students because you never know like what to expect. So I
didn't know that going in.
I'm glad I asked that. Wow, now that made sense to me, but I tell you, it probably due to a lot of the people who are into law school who are planning there. So thanks for sharing that. I think I have to ask you that. What's like the culture like? I know you mentioned a little bit about it, but you know, a place like Harvard, a lot of people can assume that it's very competitive, or is it very supportive? And how would you compare that to Indiana, like culture-wise, and I don't know, overall culture?
So law school in general is pretty competitive, and that's because this is something else I didn't know. Every single class is graded on a mandatory curve. You're always competing against other people in your class and in your section, which is like a group of law students. That's how they divide your first year students. So you're always competing with everyone in your year, in your section, in your classes for your ranking, your position. And then at the end of the year, they rank you. So you could be ranked anywhere from based on how many students you are.
Oh, wow.
So a law school in general is going to be pretty competitive. It gets less competitive after your second year, after 2L year, because at that point, most of your grades are already in, you're running out of steam and you don't really care. We call it 3 LOL. Like everyone's just kind of like not really caring. I definitely think it's interesting because at Indiana, I think that it was a little bit more of a supportive competitiveness. I think that everyone knew that we were all competing. And so we were helping each other do the best that we could and hoping that that would also teach us things so that we could also do better, which was really cool. Indiana is a really special law school. For anyone looking to go to law school in the Midwest, go to Indiana. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
At Harvard, it's split. So because there's so many people, you have groups of people who are, we call them gunners. Wow, you're getting all law school slang. These are the people who are cutthroat and will do anything to get the highest grade in the class and will ask all of your questions to the professors. They're like teacher's pets, basically. And so there is certainly that contingent of people who are very, very competitive.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you have people who, so Harvard, I think Yale does this, maybe Stanford, a few of the bigger, more highly ranked schools don't have letter grades. They do a weird grading scale. So for us, an LP is a low pass, a P is a pass, and an H is a high pass. And so since there's no like grade point average or letter grades,
yeah,
you just have to get, you just have to pass and you're basically guaranteed to pass. So because of that, there are also a lot of people here who just coast. There are a lot of people who are like, I don't care. I just have to take the exam and get an LP and I already have my job, or there are a lot of people who just kind of coast through. Mm-hmm. And then you get people who are more like the entirety of Indiana, where it's competitive, but also friendly.
Okay. That makes sense. Damn, but this sounds like a little unhealthy though. Like just like people are trying to like, I could see that there's definitely a lot of tension there. Like people trying to do better than each other, which is probably good, I guess, in that way. What you said last kind of made me wonder. Like, so when you're applying as a law student to jobs, particularly, so you don't have a GPA? It doesn't matter. Like, how your grades or anything was, right?
So at Harvard, I don't have a GPA. At pretty much every other law school in the country, you're going to have a GPA, and your GPA is the single most important thing on your application. Harvard just is Harvard and does things differently, and that's all I will say on that. So you have to really focus on getting a good GPA to get a good job at pretty much any school. At schools that do like this weird grading system, it's less about GPA and more about like recommendations and interview skills and things like that. But in general, your GPA is super important. It's also, your GPA has different levels of importance based on the career that you want to go into. So if you want to get a clerkship, which is where you work for a judge, you need a very good GPA. If you want to work for a big law firm, you need to have a fairly good GPA. You need to have a GPA that's good enough to get you in the door, like in any other industry, and then it's your interview skills after that. If you're going into a smaller, less competitive public interest environment, your GPA doesn't matter as much as the skills that you bring to the table. Right. If you're looking for a very competitive public interest fellowship or a competitive public interest position, your GPA is going to matter a lot. So it's very industry dependent.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Wow. I guess like just being in Harvard sort of like passes that. Okay, you don't need a GPA anymore. Like I think you got to Harvard, you're good.
They literally said that to us when we transferred. So all the transfer students were in the top like 5% of their class or whatever the cutoff was.
Yeah.
During orientation, they were like, congrats on all of your beautiful GPAs. Take them off your resume. You don't need them. You're at Harvard now. Literally said that to us. And all of us were like, we worked hard for that. We worked very hard for that.
That's crazy.
That's such a power move though. That's like such a big flex. Like that Harvard flexing.
And it's something that like very few schools like Harvard and Yale, right? Like it's something that very few schools can pull off.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Annie. So one question I had was about what is the plan? What are you looking to do with your career after you graduate law school?
So I just actually signed an offer letter from a big law firm here in Boston called Kirkland and Ellis, and I'm going to go to them for who knows how long after graduation. And I'm really excited because big law is where you meet a lot of really cool people who have interesting backstories and where you gain a lot of really important practical knowledge and you learn how to be a lawyer, right? Law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. It teaches you how to think about the law. Mm-hmm. Working in a law firm will teach you how to actually be a lawyer. So that's exciting. I don't know how long I'm going to stay. I think ultimately I would like to get into something policy oriented or academia, something big picture change motivated. I don't really want to work with individual clients. I want to be advocating for larger scale policy changes. So however I can do that is what I'll do.
That's really cool. I'm glad we're having this session today because 10 years later, we could pull this connection. Like we will. You're our connection to the government and the policy changes. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome that you have like a defined vision. You have a plan. I think that makes everything else so much more actionable. So that's really, really awesome. All right. So one question we have from the audience, I think I missed this about a little while ago. So Tran is asking, I'm better at math than verbal. Should I take the GRE instead of the LSAT?
So good question. Law schools were just experimenting with allowing you to take the GRE my year that I was applying. So I actually took the GRE and the LSAT, which I do not recommend to anyone.
Wow.
So I think I personally would recommend taking the LSAT even if your school accepts the GRE, because it's still such a new change that I'm not sure how schools are comparing the two internally. I'm not sure if there are some admissions officers who were really against allowing the GRE instead of the LSAT. So I think that even if you're better at math than you are at verbal, I think that the key to that is take your LSAT early and leave yourself time to study and to retake it if you need to. But I just worry about the internal backlash that you might get for taking the GRE. And I'm sorry that I have to say that, because I wish it wasn't the case, because law schools should be more accessible in general and not closing doors on people. But I would be worried about the GRE.
All right. Thanks so much.
Hopefully I'm wrong.
Thanks so much, Fran, for the great question.
Yeah.
All right, Shafuz, is it time to jump into our special segment?
Yes. And thanks a lot for our, just going through all those questions with us. That was so much valuable information. And one thing we like to do at the end of the session is our favorite rapid fire round, where we ask you random questions and you have to answer them. So, Sid, you want to get started?
Yep. So the first question, this is a new one. We've never actually asked this one before, but tell us about how you met Shafuz.
Oh God, I don't even remember.
That's interesting.
Weren't you a DeLion or a fellow on one of my halls when I was an RA?
Yeah, I think I was what was I? Yeah, I was a DeLion. I think one of my oldest memory of you is like, yeah, you were an RA, and I was, yeah. Like,
were you an eco rep? You were something.
I was an eco rep.
Were you an eco rep? Okay, so yeah, so Shafuz and I met when I was an RA, and he was like one notch below an RA, one of like the people who does like a specific niche thing.
We do the bitch work, basically.
You're not wrong. Yes, that's how I met.
Wow, that's crazy. All right, Shafuz, you're up.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, huh? Okay, cool. Annie, next one. Tell us something that not many people know about you, not as commonly known about you.
Ooh, interesting. Something that's not commonly known about me. I was a Boy Scout in high school. Not a Girl Scout, a Boy Scout.
Wow.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It was fun.
All right. Next question. Favorite things to do in Boston?
Well, nothing now because everything is shut down. I don't like the word foodie because I feel like it's been taken over by people on Instagram, but I really like trying new restaurants. And like Boston, where there are so many restaurants and breweries and wineries and things like that, it's really cool to do that. I'm also a decently avid runner, and it's really nice. Everyone in Boston runs. So like finding places to run and bike and things like that is really cool.
Wow, that is so awesome. I'm surprised you haven't bumped into Shafuz. He's always running. Whenever I call him, he's like, I'm on a jog.
He's on the other side of the river, you know.
I was going to say, I want the other side of the river. Yeah, we have that whole river in the middle. But no, we got to go on some restaurant adventures. And we could run to them or like run after them.
We could totally do that. I'm so down. Sign me up.
Absolutely. Like when I want to go like restaurant adventure, like I make sure like I run the next time, so I feel a little less guilty about myself. Like
I feel that. I ate a whole small pizza last night and made sure that I run and bike this morning. So
wow,
that's amazing. All right, we gotta do that. Next one. What's your favorite memory at UFR, or one of the memory that stands out to you? Memorable days, maybe.
So a lot of my friends were RAs because that's just how it works when you're going through hell together and running halls together. You just bond with people. So I turned, I don't know if this is PG, I turned 21 in the middle of RA training. And so I had a big party with all of my RA friends in my suite in Brooks. And it was just so awesome to be the person bringing together all of these different people from their different backgrounds and just getting to spend time with all the people that I really loved. And then the next day at orientation, seeing everyone ridiculously hungover and being like, I was the reason for that.
That's so funny. A little known secret, Sharfuz and I both tried to be RAs. We never made it.
Honestly, you lucked out. You really didn't miss much.
Yeah, we tried really hard. That's one thing we could never get.
Yeah.
You didn't really miss anything.
I think I broke too many rules for res life rules to be an RA at some point. Yeah. So you want to?
Yep. Next question. Annie, do you have a hidden talent, and if so, what is it?
Well, it's not very hidden. I've mentioned it a few times, but I am a classically trained vocalist, which isn't something that's super relevant to the legal industry, but one of my degrees from undergrad at U of R was in vocal performance. So if you ever want someone to like sing some opera or musical theater stuff, I'm your girl.
That is so awesome. Do people have you on like Zoom calls just to like sing?
So I'm in, Harvard has an a cappella group called the Scales of Justice, which everyone should follow us on Facebook because all of our concerts are virtual this semester. So you get to just our faces sing things. But that's really the extent of like my musical involvement in law school at this point. It's a lot of fun. Cool. Solidly average. We're like nothing special, nothing U of R level, but it's a lot of fun.
That's really awesome. I mean, that you're taking time to also like pursue like your hobby apart from just cramming out law school.
Yeah, don't do that. To everyone who's considering going to law school, you need to leave space for yourself because it's very easy to get sucked in and then wake up 6 months later and be like, I don't knit anymore. I don't cook anymore. Whatever it is you really like to do. Like, don't let law school take out your soul.
Yep, definitely. Keep your personality. All right, Sharfuz, you're up. Last question.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing all that. The last finale question: favorite co-host, Sid or Sharfuz? There's a very competitive leaderboard going on there.
Oh God, this is really hard. I'm gonna have to go with Sid just because I really don't want to give Sharfuz the satisfaction of knowing that he has higher energy levels.
Oh, that is so fun. I love this. Thanks so much, Annie. I really appreciate it. I have to let you know that this is the second time in a row that Sharfuz has invited a guest who I probably don't know as well, and they picked me. So it's the funniest thing ever. Sharfuz is like, I do all the work, I call these people, and they just vote for you.
So all of Sid's guests and his friends vote for him. All of my friends and guests vote for him. I'm like,
you're welcome.
That was quite a twist, Annie. I was sure I was going to have this book. But
I know. That's why I did it, honestly, because I knew we were counting on it. Because Sid and I just met like, what, an hour ago? 45 minutes? Yeah.
Oh, wow. But Annie, thanks for being such a great sport and just that was really super fun. And I think, we're like we're actually beyond our time a little bit because it was such a great conversation. We usually tell our guests it's gonna be like 30 minutes, but we're always like, oh, it's gonna be 40, 45. But this was a great conversation so far, Annie. I think one thing to wrap up with, what would be a recommendation if you had to like summarize it for aspiring lawyers who are in undergrad now, especially also like, touch a little bit upon things you wish you knew as well. What would those golden points be for you?
Well, I think I've sprinkled a few of them throughout the conversation. So just to recap, the LSAT is hell. Give yourself time to prep for it in advance. Connections are really everything, both in terms of helping you figure out where you want to go to law school and how to apply to law school. And once you're in law school, helping you get a job, helping you just have a network. And I guess the one final thing that I wish that I had known when I was prepping is that it doesn't matter if you're not the 8th person in your family to become a lawyer, right? Like you are still very capable of doing this. If it's something that you want to do, you just have to work a little bit harder, and that is going to build character and make you a better lawyer ultimately.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that would resonate so much with our audience. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, that was very insightful, Annie. And definitely gonna give you like that, your hustle game is real. Like going from Indiana to Harvard, you're like you did not like settle down. You're like striving to go to the next level. So hats off to you.
Thank you.
Very inspiring. Like, the hustle is real. But yeah, is it time for our curtains closing moment, or whatever the phrase goes?
No, for sure. All right, so. Yep, we created this beautiful creative for you, Annie.
Oh, thank you
so much for being here. This is super awesome. If you guys haven't already, go follow Annie. She's on LinkedIn at Annamarie Forestiere. And Annie, any other closing remarks from you?
Seriously, please feel free to reach out to me. I wish that I had people to reach out to when I was applying. It makes it so much easier and makes you feel a lot less crazy. So seriously, do reach out.
All right. Thanks so much. And apart from Shirfu's sounding like Travis Scott without auto-tune this entire call because of the echo, remember, elections are coming up and it's about time to vote. So if you haven't already voted, make sure to go vote and cast your ballot. All right, Shirfu, anything from you?
No, I think that was a really great note to end it on. Annie, thanks a lot so far, and I hope, as you mentioned, that it's how connections are really important, and I hope through this session a lot of people would be able to connect with you and get all the resources through Careers Uncorked. And this was an amazing conversation. Loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. We want you to join our community.
You do?
Join us by hitting that subscribe button to stay up to date with all the awesome content we have in store for you.
Oh yeah, and one more thing. Make sure to smash that like button. No way, actually, destroy it. We're millennials, we love seeing likes. Catch you next time. Whoop-pow!